Welcome to the opening ceremony of the 17th China Education Symposium at Harvard Graduate School of Education. My name is Yifei Pei, and I'm a master's student at HAXI in the Human Development and Education program. I'm honored to serve as the internal co-chair of this year's symposium.
I'm Xiaoxi Liu, the external co-chair of this year's symposium and a current student in Education Leadership, Organizations and Entrepreneurship program at HAXI. On behalf of the entire organizing committee, we are thrilled to have you here with us today.
尊敬的各位来宾、女士们、先生们，大家下午好！欢迎出席第17届哈佛中国教育论坛。我是本届的内务主席裴一菲，哈佛大学教育学院人类发展与教育在读。
我是本届的外务主席刘晓溪，目前就读于哈佛大学教育学院教育领导力、组织与创业专业。我仅代表第17届哈佛中国教育论坛全体组委会成员，对各位嘉宾和观众的到来表示最热烈的欢迎。Established in 2010, the China Education Symposium is an official student organization at Harvard Graduate School of Education. What began as a student project in a Harvard classroom has grown into one of the most recognized platforms in the United States with a focus on education in China and global education. Today, we are proud to have gathered a global community of over 2,000 members and have reached more than 60,000 followers across our platforms.
The theme this year is 1,000 Leaps of Change, illuminating the future of education. In a rapidly changing world, education must not only adapt, but also lead. We focus on how education can respond, reconstruct, and reimagine the future. To navigate change is to respond to the shifting world, and to pursue light is to envision the future of education. Together, they reflect our commitment to empowering learners, bridging cultures, and shaping a future where every student can thrive.
古语有言：察事者明，趋势者智，去世者独步天下。着眼当下，今天的我们选择从变出发。我们谈变，是因为教育始终发生于变化之中，也始终进步于变化之中。
教育所面对的不只是一个正在改变的世界，还有不断被重塑的人与人、与社会、与技术、与内心之间的关系。也正是在这样的思考之下，本届论坛以欲变烛光，其教育之治应万世之机为主题，尝试回答这个时代对教育的提问。欲变是对世事变迁的回应，烛光是对教育未来的愿景。我们相信，在流动的世界里不断调试，在不确定中寻找确定，这正是教育的力量所在。
Today's program features distinguished opening remarks, 3 inspiring keynote addresses, and a moderated panel discussion with leading scholars and practitioners. We are honored to have you all as part of the conversation, and we would also like to extend our sincere gratitude to our exclusive nonprofit partner, Visionary Education Foundation, 远见教育基金, for their generous support of this year's symposium.
Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished opening remarks speakers for today. Mr. You Genyu is the educational counselor at Chinese Consulate General in New York. With decades of experience in international education exchange, he has been a bridge between China and the US in the field of education. Please join me in welcoming Mr. You Genyu for the opening remarks.
Thank you for the introduction, and distinguished scholars and experts, dear teachers and students. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to return to Harvard Education School, and also for this very important and branding academic seminar organized by students' organizations and supported by different sectors of the society. I also want to extend our welcome to the Chinese delegation. We just met professors from Beijing Normal University, Capital Normal University, and the students delegation from East China Normal University. and welcome to join this delegation important events. I also want to send our appreciation to those who have long time championed education exchange between China and the US. It is especially encouraging to this year's forum addressing key themes such as well-being education, teacher empowerment, family education, education equality, media literacy, and education technology. These are all highly relevant topics for educators worldwide, sparking directly to the priorities and challenge shaping education for the future. Education holds an enduring and universal significance. It is the engine of the economic and social development, and the compass guiding our societies through an era of complexity and uncertainty. Today, we are witnessing a transformation of education landscape. The rapid advancement of technology, particularly artificial intelligence, is fundamentally reshaping how knowledge is created, shared, acquired, and mastered. And these changes extend beyond campuses and national borders. They present challenges that no single country can address alone. Although our social and educational system may differ in structure, we share a fundamental purpose. This common ground makes dialogue not only possible, but essential. Platforms like the China Education Forum play a crucial role by providing a space where educators and young students from China and the US can engage in open dialogue and exchange ideas that actually matter to both countries. Education exchange remains one of the most resilient and dynamic pillars of the China-US bilateral relationship. Over the decade, the steady flow of students and scholars has built a fundamental of mutual understanding and transcend our physical boundaries. Over 50 joint institutions, such as NYU Shanghai, Wenzhou Ken University, serve as a successful model of this enduring evolution. Furthermore, the expansion of 291 joint degree programs between China and American universities across diverse disciplines continue to deepen and reinforce our academic partnership. Together, they demonstrate how we can integrate respective education strengths while adapting to local needs. This engagement is clearly reflected in our research. Institutions from both countries have made significant advances across all fields. For years, China-US co-authored research collaboration papers have represented one of the largest volumes of international research collaboration worldwide. This is a testament to the scale and impact of our shared intellectual endeavorment. At this core, the relationship is about people, especially the youth. Through the initiative to invite 50,000 American students to visit China, we are delighted that over 40,000 US students have already taken this opportunity to experience the China firsthand, fostering a more concrete and authentic understanding that can have a lasting influence across generations. I also want to champion that Harvard Graduate School of Education have sent students delegation to visit China last year and made a great experience. China's education system has made significant advancement in both scale and quality. So today, China is the home to 3,167 higher education institutions, serving more than 48 million students, while the US, reflecting a similar overall landscape, has over 4,000 institutions of higher education with around 20 million students. With a gross enrollment rate over 60%, China has entered a stage of broad accessibility. Through the double first-class initiative, 147 universities are being supported in their pursuit of academic excellence and global competitiveness. These institutions not only cultivate talents, but also serve at the forefront of scientific innovation. Supporting this infrastructure is a dedicated workforce of 18.7 million teachers, spanning from elementary school to higher education. So we have a very sizable teacher population in China. It is recognized that a resilient system depends on the professional development and the well-being of its educators, who remain the essential guardian and contributors to the quality and accessibility of education. As we look to the future, the question is not whether the exchanges should be continued, but also we can make them more sustainable and impactful. This requires mutual commitment to openness, especially during uncertain times. It demands that we keep communication channels broad and active. We must deepen our cooperation in fields that will define the future, ranging from cutting-edge technologies to interdisciplinary studies, while ensuring these opportunities remain accessible to all. Education is fundamental as an investment for the future. Our willingness to stay engaged and deepen our mutual understanding provides a steady, constructive path forward. I hope this forum will not only spark a vibrant exchange of ideas, but also illuminate innovative pathways for education development. Finally, I wish the forum great success and hope all of you enjoy a very productive and rewarding experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Yu, for your thoughtful opening remarks. In our original program, Dr. Mark Elliott, Vice Provost for International Affairs at Harvard University, was scheduled to deliver opening remarks. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it today due to some unforeseen circumstances. But Dr. Elliott has played a key role in advancing Harvard's global engagement and fostering international partnerships. And he has asked us to convey his sincere best wishes for a successful symposium.
As we gather under the theme, 1,000 Leaps of Change, perhaps the most honest place to begin is not with certainty, but with questions. In a time of rapid transformation, we're still learning how to understand what these changes truly mean. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Justin Reich, Director of the MIT Teaching Systems Lab and Associate Professor at MIT. His research focuses on how educational systems can continuously improve and adapt to the needs of learners in a digital age. He is also the author of several publications, including Failure to Disrupt: Why Technology Alone Can't Transform Education. Today, Dr. Reich will deliver a keynote titled The Homework Machine and What Comes After. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Justin Reich.
How wonderful to see you all. Thanks for being here. I'm also an EDD grad from some years ago, so it's wonderful to be able to be back and to be able to join you. My hunch is over the next day or multiple days as you're gathering together, one of the things that you'll be talking about is new technologies and the way that new technologies are challenging schools to change how they operate, change what students are learning, change how students are learning, and those kinds of questions. I started my career as a 9th grade world history teacher. So for me, it's very natural in moments of great change to look back on ancient wisdom. And we probably, what better place than to gather wisdom from the Analects. The master said, "You, shall I teach you what knowledge is? When you know a thing, to hold that you know it. And when you do not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it. This is knowledge." As far as generative AI goes, I think you are here. We do not know what we do not know, and we do not know the ways forward. This is really hard for educators. Educators have a wonderful intuition to seek best practices, to say, oh, somebody out there has got to know how to solve this problem. And that's a good instinct in most cases. If you don't know how to teach your students to read English, you should not make up the teaching of English from first principles. You should not be guessing the best ways to do that in your classroom, because over the last several decades, we've come up with a pretty good science of how you teach kids how to read English. We don't have that science for how to integrate generative AI into our practices in our classrooms. We don't know what to do. And that forces us to move forward with humility and with an intuition that our job is not to find best practices, but to navigate uncertainty, to experiment, to invent new ways of moving forward. How should you start doing that? Part of what I am these days is a sort of applied historian. So I look back at the history of education technology, and I look at the series of hype cycles that we go through in the United States for over a century now, since Thomas Edison promised us that film strips would entirely replace text in classrooms. And say, all right, well, what did we do in the last hype cycle, and how well did it work? What did we do with iPads, or MOOCs, or smart boards, or maker spaces, or whatever else it was? And what might we do better this time? When new hype cycles come along, we have an inclination to listen to experts, or maybe an inclination to listen to elites. We listen to professors, to the people who run tech companies. We listen to keynote speakers, thought leaders. Most of these people have no idea at all what it looks like for generative AI to enter classrooms, because they're not there. They're busy, I don't know, being thought leaders, whatever thought leaders do. I think when societal changes come along that are going to affect education, the first thing to do is to listen to the teachers and the students who are navigating these changes in classrooms. So pretty much as soon as ChatGPT came out and was widely available to the public, we started this project called the Homework Machine, where we interviewed 120 teachers and students all across the country. Big schools, small schools, rural schools, urban schools. We actually didn't even start with the question of what's AI doing in your classroom? We start with the question of, how is your year going? What's happening? What are you seeing around you? What's important? There are lots of schools where people say, man, this thing ChatGPT just arrived. It's causing these problems, or it's creating these opportunities. There are lots of places where we visited who started things like, since the pandemic, kids aren't showing up to school. We have these major problems with chronic absenteeism. If the big problem in your school is chronic absenteeism, you don't have any other problems. The number one thing to do is to get the students in their classrooms. So in places where kids show up to school hungry, in places where kids show up to school without adequate nutrition, adequate health care, ChatGPT is not their first order of concern. But it was an order of concern for lots of them. I'm going to see if I can do this from here. But let's just listen to one teacher for a minute about one story of what she's experiencing.
Just what would your guess be of how many are using AI and what would they feel comfortable?
This feels really hard.
Just what would your guess be of how many are using AI? Just what would your guess be of how many are using AI and what would they feel comfortable?
This feels really hard. This is part of the concern. It's then you just become a paranoid person. You distrust every single thing your students give you. You start to kind of move through the world with this sense of everybody's cheating, nobody's doing the work. I can't trust anybody, and that is a terrible, terrible place to be. I really love my students, and I really want to believe that they're good and ethical people who care about their learning and their process. And then I hear myself being I'm pretty sure everybody is cheating. Everybody's using AI to cheat, and I don't like that I believe that about myself. So then I sort of temper it by saying, oh, well, they're probably not, or they're probably just using Grammarly, but it's hard to know. I think I'm not giving you an answer because I don't like what the answer is, which is I think the majority of kids are using AI to cheat.
So Sarah has, she's a 20-year veteran teacher. She's built this professional practice. She's built it on hundreds of years of professional practice in teaching English and teaching journalism. And new technology arrives in her classroom, and it makes lots of things that she's doing not work anymore. That's a really hard place to be. That's a really unsettling place to be. And there's no good, clear advice to give to Sarah. Part of what we tell the rest of the story is Sarah knocks on the door of the San Francisco Unified School District and says, "What should we do?" And they basically don't respond for a summer. And then later on they respond and they say, "Well, here's some AI tools you can try." And she's like, "That's not my question. My question is, how do I continue to foster intellectual growth in my students using these activities we've developed to do that over the last decade? So those activities don't seem to be working anymore."
Just what would your
So here's my summary of the challenge that schools face. And my hunch is the challenge in China is not that different from the challenge in the United States. So schools have to do something. Pretty much everybody who has a handheld supercomputer in the network world has a set of tools that means that they can choose not to do their homework anymore in an undetectable way. That's a big change. It also could be that these AI tools are actually sources of really important innovation, sources of really important learning. The schools have to do something. Here's one sort of funny example well, maybe the next thing I want to say is that schools do not know what to do. We do not know what that next step should be. Here is a paper that some colleagues of mine at RAND wrote with me. It was about a series of surveys of teachers and students and parents about their experiences using AI. And the first piece of the sort of like number one recommendation is trusted sources such as states should provide guidance on what effective AI policies and training look like. And I was like, Chris, the lead author, you can't publish that. The states don't know what to do. There are no trusted sources yet. Like, if you ask them what to do, they don't have good guidance. And just a little bit after I was unsuccessful in persuading them, this came out in the paper. These are some of the items in the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education AI guidance. And if you read them, they're basically a series of questions. There are questions like, discuss whether your district is using a consistent definition and framework to guide AI literacy. Like the RAND folks were like, go ask the state what to do. And the state was like, I don't know, districts, what do you think we should do? And there's a sort of circle of questions going back and forth. What neither party is doing is acknowledging that we don't know what to do. Another, to me, sort of funny part of the Massachusetts guidance is there's these series of action steps that schools might try. Like one of them is identify subject areas where AI enhances inquiry, creativity, or analysis. No one knows what that is. There were, in the Massachusetts document, I think there are 134 of these action steps. Go find a principal in Massachusetts or a head teacher in China and ask them if they have time to do 134 additional things and watch their head explode. None of these are necessarily, I mean, they might be good ideas. Some of them are assuredly bad ideas because maybe the one idea that I want to leave you with is that it's possible that if we don't know what to do, a reasonable thing to try would be like, well, let's just give it a shot. Let's just try some things, see what our best ideas are. But it turns out that actually our early guesses about what to do with new technologies are often wrong. There is a long history of employing education technologies, sometimes in ways that are just ineffective. So in the United States, schools have spent millions and millions of dollars on smartboards, digital whiteboards. There is no evidence whatsoever that digital whiteboards improve learning in any way. Every dollar we spent on digital whiteboards, we could have spent on something that actually improved learning. But there are also examples where things that we teach students are not only ineffective, but they're actually wrong. So one of my favorite examples of this is the research on teaching students how to search the web. So when I was a teacher in 2003, we were given these checklists, things that were called things like the crack test. And we said, have students use these checklists to evaluate websites. We subsequently did research on these checklists and found that when students used it, they very frequently came to spurious and incorrect answers. Even really smart students using these checklists do a bad job evaluating the web. Another way to frame this is that Google was founded in 1995. The first peer-reviewed research that has, I think, really good guidance for how to teach students to sort truth from fiction on the web was published in 2019. 25 years later. And in the meantime, what we gave people was a lot of ideas that we're pretty sure now don't work. So if you look across the landscape of AI guidance that exists today, some substantial fraction of it is wrong. Almost none of it has any evidence behind it. Some substantial fraction of it is assuredly wrong. And the thing that we've learned over time is that when we spread incorrect and bad ideas throughout the system, they're actually hard to get out of there. You can still, walk from this building to a nearby public school, and you're very likely to encounter instruction that still teaches people provably ineffective ways of searching the web. So we have an opportunity with AI to try a different approach, to not race into certainty, but to move forward with humility, is to say that we don't know what the right steps are. We don't know what it is that we're supposed to do next. And we can be honest with each other and honest with our students about that. We can say, look, these are new tools, and we're not sure the best way to teach you how to navigate them. And some of the things we try, you're going to find out are wrong. But we can explore them together. We can play together. We can experiment together, and we can be really thoughtful about evaluating whether or not the things that we're trying are working. So as you listen to people talk, particularly about generative AI, one sort of trick that I found really useful is to say that there are no best practices, there are only hypotheses. There are people that are out there that have guesses, and fortunately you all, with your wonderful education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, know how to test hypotheses now. You know how to bring ideas into classrooms, into systems, into the world, and not just to spread them, but to say, what would be the right approach to evaluating whether or not these new ideas are actually leading us to better and more effective learning? What kind of evidence would we need to be able to say that one approach is more valuable than another? You will bring to bear experimental strategies like design thinking, approaches to engineering. There are lots of different ways of doing this, but I think the idea is to start by saying, we don't know what to do. There are some ideas out there that we could try. We're going to put these ideas in the world. We're going to test them. When they work, we're going to build on them and move forward with them. And when they don't work, we're going to throw them away and try something else. And we'll just be really honest with our students that we don't know what to do yet. And this won't be the case. One day you'll come to a China Education Symposium 15 years from now, 20 years from now, and we won't say we don't know what to do. We'll say, oh, we've got some good science on this now. We have some good ideas about how to move forward. But I think the signature challenge that education systems face in the decade ahead is navigating this period of extended uncertainty. In the moments in which we don't have big science to tell us what to do, how do we explore and experiment together? And with that, I turn it over to our host to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reich, for that thought-provoking keynote. And if we're still learning how to navigate this moment of uncertainty, the deeper question emerges. In the midst of all these changes, what is truly worth learning? And it is my honor to introduce Dr. David Perkins, professor at Harvard Graduate School of Education and founding member of world-renowned Project Zero, and the author of numerous influential books, including Making Learning Whole and Future-Wise. Today, he will present a talk titled Learning That Matters. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. David Perkins.
Thank you so much.
Let's see if this works.
Oh, that's heartening. Well, congratulations on this event. I think it's a wonderful thing to be doing. Those 1,000 changes are something we should be eager to explore. And I'm certainly eager to explore one aspect of it with you. Learning that matters. What's that about? Let us begin. Does this work? The clicker? Okay, we're good. Thank you. Here, with this hand, around the world, with so many classrooms, once in a great while, a student in the back of the class raises a hand and asks this question: why are we studying this? I wouldn't be a bit surprised if some people had done that, or at least wanted to do that. It's not a very nice question. Teachers work so hard, education works so hard, but it is an important question to bear in mind. After all, why does the curriculum teach what it teaches? Well, broadly speaking, there are three influences. One is tradition, the scroll on the left. What's been taught last year, or the year before, or even 20 or 30 years ago, or more. Another, the keys, is what is key in the various disciplines, history, science, and so forth, because the disciplines are a rich reservoir of important insights. And the third, of course, on the right, is the test. Because if you want to know why we're teaching this, it's going to be on the test. And in fairness, some tests are good. And in fairness, regardless of good or not, a lot of tests are simply mandated at one or another level, and they become a force. So yes, one can understand the political particulars, if you like, of why we teach what we teach. But the child's question, why are we studying this? Why are we learning this? Has a larger answer that we all know, that every teacher knows, that every parent knows. It's for the future empowerment and insight of the learner. We're studying such and such today, but it's not just for today. It's not even just for tomorrow or next year. It's for the years to come. And there is the big question we should be asking ourselves. What, therefore, should learning be like? Well, here's the usual solution. We teach a lot. We sample around important ideas in the various disciplines and get them in there. Bits of science, bits of biology and physics, aspects of history, important voices from literature, and so forth and so on. And please, don't get me wrong here, this is not a bad approach. It does put a lot on the table. And especially for those of us who are academically minded, and probably that's true of virtually everybody in this room and online and so on, there's a lot of interest to be had there. So, yeah, so far, so good. And make no mistake about this either. There is abundant research over multiple nations and cultures that just relatively humdrum standard education is transformative in a culture. It makes a huge difference, even though people such as us may scratch our head and say, well, couldn't it be better this way and couldn't it be better that way? Let's be thankful that it's there. Okay, but that said, there is a catch with this teaching a lot approach. We might symbolize it with this somewhat more fuzzy image. In fact, there are two catches. One typical catch is that the concepts and topics are not taught in enough depth so that learners can actually think with them, can actually face a complex world and figure things out. Even at that time, but maybe they're young, but even later, not enough experience to think with. There's another barrier in the way, however, that is really rather discouraging. Many of us in the room may have read from time to time, what happens if 10 years later you test learners for what they remember of what they learned? Or 15 years you test later for what they remember of what they learned? Not much. Not much. It's largely disappeared. And why has it disappeared? Actually, the science of memory teaches a little bit about that. We have a familiar saying that goes, use it or lose it. Knowledge that's been acquired, but then later does not see some use, evaporates. And considering psychology and memory and capacity and so forth, it ought to evaporate. It's just old baggage. So, if we want what's learned to stick and inform, it needs to see some use. Okay, so suppose we want to think ahead about how curriculum and the entire enterprise of education might do better. Let's look at a couple of tools. Here's a tool. It's a set of 3 criteria. If you or I were putting together a curriculum, what would we put in it? Here are 3 standards. 1, disciplinary significance. Let's draw powerful ideas from the disciplines. 2, frequent future. Let's choose ideas that one way or another are likely to come up as learners later in life navigate our complex world, manage their finances, manage their relationships, manage their citizenship roles, and so forth. And standard number 3, deep learning. Let's have that content learned deeply enough and flexibly enough so that those learners can wield it in our complex world. Disciplinary significance, frequent future, and deep learning. If you grade, if you like, various topics in a typical curriculum, you are likely to find that not many of them reach all 3 standards at once. Well, all this sounds very nice, yes. Let's go do this. However, there is one very blatant reservation about it all. It's about the future. And the future is a bit of a casino. We don't know where the wheel is going to stop. So, how can we ask that question about frequent future? Well, it's not as hard as one might fear at first. Let me speak to that by giving a couple of examples. Here's one. I bet you know what that stands for. It stands for climate change. Let's take climate change as an example. Sadly, we do not know how our civilization is going to meet the problems of climate change in the next 20 years. But we do know that it's going to be on the table. We do know that it's going to be in the foreground of many considerations. So, we can bear that in mind when we're making those choices. And moreover, climate change is a beautiful example of a highly interdisciplinary theme that speaks to all sorts of disciplines. Biology, the biosphere, the physics of the atmosphere, political and sociological considerations about who has the power, who has the support, influence sources, and so forth and so on. So there's one example. Here's another example. This is history. What does history have to do with the future? Well, Mark Twain, an American author, spoke a lovely quip about this. I think I love to take it apart. He said, history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And it's the rhyming of history that makes history important for facing our complex world today and in the future. By learning history in ways that looks for those rhymes, explores them today, and speculates about where they might go, we achieve a kind of empowerment for the future from the past. Just two examples. For a larger scale tool, here are 6 principles of choice, and I like to call them the 6 B1s. Let me go over them quickly. Beyond topics, if we are fiddling with the curriculum, it's not just about topics, it's how to think with the topics. Beyond content, it's not just about content-oriented topics, it's about things like learning skills, thinking and learning dispositions, and so forth. Beyond traditional disciplines, it's, yes, about the disciplines we usually teach, but also, for instance, more psychology and sociology, because huge amounts are known about interpersonal dynamics and personal nature that are very informative about how to live a life. Beyond discrete disciplines, again, interdisciplinarity, as in the case of climate change. Beyond local, okay, it's not just about us in this room, it's not just about us in this city or this nation. We live in an extremely interconnected world. We need the big picture together with the small picture. And it's hard to use that. What's the last one? Oh, sure. It's beyond academic engagement. Yeah, personally I find it very cool just to study something for its own sake, certain things at least. I'm sure many people in this room do. But we really want to teach not just to think about the content, but to think with the content. So that's another tool. All right. It's been my privilege over many years as an educator to be able to work with colleagues and with people in a number of different nations on these sorts of fronts to try to push these agendas forward. And we're always looking for more collaborations, feel free. But it's not easy. There is no magic wand in these sorts of ideas. There is no neat 10 steps, follow the 10 steps and you're there. To pursue such an agenda is a complex, culture-relative, nation-relative enterprise. Nonetheless, let us remind ourselves of the child with the hand raised. The question the child asks, why are we learning this? The very best answer would come on the right from that same child, grown up, engaging the problems that faces him or her, and saying, ah, now I see why we were studying that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perkins, for reflecting with us on what it means for learning to truly matter. As we begin to clarify what kind of learning matters, the next question is, how does that learning connect us to one another and to the world we are shaping together? It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Fernando Reimers, Ford Foundation Professor of the Practice of International Education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Today, he will deliver a talk about international education and peace. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Fernando Reimers.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Yu began his remarks talking about educational exchanges of students, of scholars between China and the United States. And those exchanges are part of a field called international education. I want to talk about the relationship between international education and peace. And I want to advance a simple argument. International education has long been imagined as a peace project, from cooperation between war periods to the founding of UNESCO after World War II, to flagship exchange programs such as Fulbright, and many subsequent efforts in international higher education, the field has been built on the belief that education can humanize international relations by helping people understand one another across borders. That aspiration remains powerful, but today it also requires careful examination. I'm going to make 3 points in my talk. First, the evidence suggests that international education is often associated with peace-related dispositions: tolerance, empathy, intercultural understanding, and intercultural competence. Second, those outcomes are conditional, not automatic. They are strongest when they happen under sustained, well-scaffolded, cross-cultural engagement, and they're often weaker, mixed, or even counterproductive in conflict-affected settings when programs are externally designed or disconnected from local realities. And the third point, if international education is to contribute more credibly to peace in the future, we need a stronger scholarly agenda, better concepts, better measures, and better ways of connecting individual learning to institutional and societal outcomes. I'm going to make this argument in 4 steps. First, I'm going to quickly revisit the historical idea of international education as a peace project. Second, I'm going to summarize what the empirical literature tells us. Third, I'm going to draw on evidence from recent work on how students at this school and graduates describe the value of learning alongside international peers. And finally, I'm going to suggest what this means for research and for practice. So let me talk about international education as a peace project. International education has repeatedly been justified as peace work. There is a long genealogy here. The League of Nations and interwar intellectual cooperation carried the hope that scholarly exchange could reduce nationalism and misunderstanding. After World War II, UNESCO institutionalized the idea that peace had to be being built in the minds of men, because it is in the minds of men that wars begin. Exchange programs, international schools, comparative education, and later global citizenship education all inherited a version of that aspiration. At its core was the preventive logic. If individuals learn with, from, and about others across borders before conflict hardens, perhaps stereotypes, dehumanization, and fear will have less room to become violence. That aspiration remains compelling. But history also teaches us caution. Institutional mission statements are not mechanisms. Declaring peace as a goal does not guarantee peace as an outcome. So the key question is not whether international education has been justified in the name of peace. Rather, the key question is under what conditions does it actually contribute to peace-related outcomes? I reviewed 2 bodies of scholarly literature. The first, I read 52 studies published over the last decade, the last 2 decades actually, between 94 and 2025, that examined the association between international education and peace-related outcomes. And across those studies, exchanges, international degree programs, global education curricula, and collaborative projects, the most common reported outcomes are the development of tolerance, empathy, intercultural understanding, intercultural competency, perspective-taking, critical reflexivity, and in some cases, more inclusive identities or forms of global citizenship. The mechanisms that this literature identifies are also fairly consistent. There are cognitive mechanisms, perspective-taking, critical thinking, and the ability to see issues from more than one standpoint. There are social mechanisms, meaningful contact across difference, reduction of stereotypes, and the building of networks and trust. And there are emotional mechanisms, the development of empathy, and the reduction of fear or anxiety in encounters with people from different identities. And there are also identity-related mechanisms, movement or more layered or less bounded understanding of belonging. This literature also shows 2 patterns that are especially important. First, there is a dosage effect. deeper and more sustained engagement generally produces stronger outcomes than brief or superficial encounters. And second, there's an interaction effect. Mere proximity to others that are different is insufficient. Students don't become more peaceful simply by sitting in the same room. Outcomes depend on structured opportunities for meaningful contact, for dialogue, for collaboration, and for reflection. So the strongest evidence is not that international education reduces conflict at scale. The strongest evidence is that it can develop proximal peace capacities, the dispositions and the competencies that make peaceful coexistence and cooperation more likely. But this relationship is, as I mentioned, conditional rather than automatic. This is especially clear in conflict-affected areas and post-conflict settings. Studies from Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, East Timor, Sierra Leone, Myanmar, Palestine, and Sri Lanka show that internationally led reforms and exchange initiatives can have mixed or negative effects when they are externally designed, politically instrumentalized, or disconnected from the structural drivers of violence and exclusion. There are three recurring problems that stand out in these studies. The first is external design without sufficient local agency. Programs very often carry assumptions, categories, and goals imported from outside. They may lack legitimacy. They may fail to resonate locally or reproduce epistemic hierarchies. The second is a focus on individual attitudes without structural transformation. Programs may teach tolerance while leaving untouched the inequalities, the segregated institutions, and the contested histories that generate grievance. And the third is the political instrumentalization of education governance. Curriculum, language policy, and school structures may be used by elites to consolidate boundaries rather than bridge them. In those contexts, international involvement does not necessarily shift education towards peace. So the more accurate conclusion is this: international education appears most likely to contribute to peace when it is sustained, dialogic, grounded in local context, attentive to structural inequality, and supported by institutions that value pluralism. I also reviewed a second body of studies, this time 200 papers, also produced over the last 20 years, on whether global citizenship education is retreating in the face of rising nationalism around the world. And the answer is yes. There is strong evidence of retrenchment, marginalization, or instrumentalization of global citizenship education across many settings. In the UK, the promotion of fundamental British values narrowed the space for more cosmopolitan forms of citizenship education. In the United States, populist attacks on globalism intensified pressure against global education. In Turkey, citizenship and human rights education was repealed and replaced with content more aligned to state ideology. In Israel, Pakistan, China, and other contexts, curricula have often prioritized national, religious, or state-defined narratives over plural, critical, or globally oriented ones. In many cases, global citizenship education is not removed entirely, but softened or instrumentalized, instead of cultivating critical engagement with inequality, power, and interdependence. It is redefined in utilitarian terms, often to support national competitiveness in a global economy. What this means is that one of the educational traditions most explicitly linked to peace is under pressure at exactly the historical moment when many would argue we need it the most. Let me now turn to evidence from our own students here, because I think it helps clarify a mechanism often overlooked in the literature. I examined three bodies of evidence from our own students. The first was a survey that I conducted in 2017 among graduates of a program in international education that had existed in the school for 2 decades. And that survey asked those students a bunch of questions, including what kinds of skills had they gained in the program, and invited a number of them to write reflective essays, which I analyzed qualitatively. And I didn't conduct that survey thinking about the topic of today. I went back to those data as I had to prepare this presentation. The second group of evidence A group of 12 faculty members last semester were invited to add in their course evaluations a simple question to their students. What did you gain from learning alongside international peers? And I analyzed those answers, and that's what I'm going to report. So across these sources, one theme that stands out with much consistency is that learning alongside international peers deepens students' capacity to understand complexity. Graduates identified the skills essential for leading educational change as communication, stakeholder engagement, coalition building, collaboration, systems thinking, empathy, and adaptability. And when they were asked what they had learned in the program that had been most valuable in their careers, they emphasized the capacity to compare education systems, the capacity to understand education systems across contexts, research and evaluation skills, the capacity to collaborate in diverse teams, and the ability to translate ideas into action. The course evaluations from the data collected last semester reinforce this pattern. Across those 12 graduate courses, the average rating that students provided to the benefit of learning alongside international peers was on a scale of 1 to 5, 4.45. Students say that international peers make theory real. They bring policy and research to life through lived experience. They challenge case studies from the standpoint of actual implementation. They show how similar policies play out differently across settings. Let me skip ahead to conclude. If international education is to move from a powerful norm to a more evidence-informed framework for preventive diplomacy, we need a stronger scholarly agenda. And let me suggest 5 priorities. Number 1, improve peace measurement. Across the literature, peace is used to mean many different things. The absence of violence, social cohesion, reconciliation, positive peace, democratic coexistence. We need clearer concepts and better aligned measurements. Second, strengthen causal inference. Much of the evidence that we have is qualitative, it's observational, it's self-reported, it's valuable, but it's limited. We need more studies that follow people over time. We need comparative studies. And where appropriate, we need some kind of quasi-experimental approaches. Third, we need to link micro-level outcomes to meso and macro-level outcomes. We know more about individual attitudes than about institutional change or community-level effects. Preventive diplomacy requires attention to networks, to institutions, and to systems, not just to individuals. And then finally, study boundary conditions more systematically. Conflict status, program intensity, local agency, equity of access, and pedagogical design are all important. We need research that helps us specify not just whether international education contributes to peace, but under what conditions it does. And finally, attend to equity and access. If international education reaches only elites, what peace effects can realistically diffuse at a societal scale? That is both an empirical and a moral question. So let me close with this. International education has long been imagined as a peace project, and there is real evidence that supports that aspiration. It is frequently associated with tolerance, with empathy, with intercultural understanding, and with more complex ways of thinking about the world. But those outcomes are not automatic. They depend on depth, on structure, on local agency, on equity, and they are increasingly threatened by rising nationalism, which narrows the educational space for global engagement. The evidence from our own students and graduates reinforces one important insight. Learning alongside international peers changes not only what students know, but how they think. It helps them move from simplistic and bounded reasoning toward contextual, comparative, and systems-level understanding. That, I would suggest, is not only an educational goal, it's also a peace-relevant capacity. So if we want international education to function more credibly as preventive diplomacy, then the task before us is not simply to defend it rhetorically, it is to design it better, to study it more rigorously, and to evaluate it against outcomes that matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reimers. Let's give another round of applause to all 3 of our speakers. Thank you so much for setting such a rich and thought-provoking foundation. And across these talks, we'd be invited to navigate uncertainty, to reflect on what truly matters in learning, and to consider the broader purpose of education in a connected and complex world. To explore these ideas in conversation, we now turn to our moderated panel discussion. Let me pass over to our moderator, Yifei, and welcome our panelists to join us on stage.
Hi everyone, we will now be moving on to our panel session. And each of our panelists here approaches the moment of change from a different perspective and expertise. So first of all, let me introduce our panelists today. And on my left, first of all, we have Dr. John Mehta, professor of Harvard Graduate School of Education and author of In Search of Deep Learning. His work explores the difference between learning and schooling, what it means to pursue deeper learning, and the importance of being human in an age shaped by AI and political polarization. And next up, we have Dr. Nicole Mills, Joint Director of Language Programs in the Department of Romance Languages and Literatures at Harvard University. Her research explores the psychology of language learning, as well as how AI and immersive environment are transforming the learning of language. And next up, we have Dr. Emma Ruiwen-Peng. She's a research affiliate at MIT Media Lab and former Associate Director of the Tsinghua University Lab for Lifelong Learning. And her work brings together design, learning sciences, and systems thinking to examine how we learn and adapt in a rapidly changing world. So welcome to all of our panelists. So to begin, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to offer a few brief reflections from their own perspectives before we move into a moderated conversation. So Dr. Zhao, let us start with you. In your work, you draw an important distinction between schooling and learning and challenge us to think about what deeper learning really means, especially in the time shaped by AI and increasing social complexity. We'd love to hear your reflection on how you see the role of education evolving in this time.
Great. Thank you very much, and congratulations on putting together this symposium. So great to see so many people here on a Friday afternoon. I once taught a class on a Friday between 12 and 3, and it was really the best class I ever taught because everybody really wanted to be there. So I feel the same about this afternoon. So I just wanted to make kind of three points about AI to get us started. So the first is that generative AI is, more than anything to my mind, revealing underlying problems in our model of education. So it's not that it is creating or solving said problems, it's that it reveals problems that were there all along. So if you're a university and you offer classes for freshmen that have 400 or 500 or 600 people, and you give out the same exams year after year, and there's no relationship between the professor and the students, and the kind of information or the kind of essay or the kind of writing you're looking for is fairly low-level writing, then you shouldn't be surprised if you end up in the kind of cycle that teacher in Justin, that clip that Justin played, so memorably disguised, right? We're in a world where students will write with AI and then feed the AI through humanizing software, which will make a few mistakes so that it doesn't look like AI, and then the professors or the graduate students who don't have time to grade such things might either used AI detection software or graded with AI, and we're really in a kind of a negative downward cycle. But if instead we were to have classes that were smaller and there were to be relationships between students and professors, and students were to be doing original work that they were invested in, that was original, that drew on new sources, that was authentic to their communities, then they would be much more likely, less likely to use AI, or more likely to use it in the way it was intended, which is as a tool rather than as a replacement. So people like me and Dave and others, Justin, have been for a long time asking education to change, but some combination of tradition, economics, capitalism, state tests, etc., have held things in place. So perhaps the fact that teachers are faced with this sort of almost existential challenge to the way in which they have done things may sort of lead to some change in a way that previous developments have done. I said 3 points, but I'm going to cut it to 2 since looking at the clock. And then the second and related point is, like, how are we going to change and what direction? So I think Justin was very right when he put up that slide about humility, right? So I think the answers to this AI question are specific, contextual, depends on the subject, the learner, the age, the level of development, the goals, the purpose of said class. So I could tell a sort of techno-pessimism story, and that might be like GPS. So I'm 48 years old. I came of age driving pre-GPS. And so in the streets of Baltimore, where I grew up, to this day, I can navigate. I know where things are. I can move from this place to that place. Then GPS came in around the time I was maybe 25 or 26, about 20 years ago. It's about when I started driving in Boston. Maybe it's a Boston-Baltimore difference, who knows? And like, I still use GPS to get places that I've been to 50 times because mentally, like, my brain has not gone down those roads in the way that it needs to. So there are a lot of situations where, you know, if a student is going to learn and inhabit a skill, they have to be the one to learn and inhabit the skill. And there's sort of no substitute for that. But there may be other situations where, you know, there was a fact which came out recently during the Olympics, for example, that Norway has produced a much higher than per capita would be expected share of Olympic athletes and Olympic medals. And apparently that is because Norway, when you are young, you can participate in any realm of youth sports essentially for free until you're 13. And I put that into generative AI and I said, are there other examples of places which have used a broad-based approach to developing skill as opposed to the other way to produce Olympic athletes, which is to find the most genetically talented kids when they're 6 years old and put them in an academy and train them until an inch of their life in time for the Olympics. And generative AI gave me a whole range of examples from around the world. Now, imagine like me having that query 5 or 7 or 10 years ago. I mean, there was Google, there are books, there are people who know about these things, but in some ways, like, this was generating more examples more quickly than would have been possible. So I guess the last point I would make is one thing that we've learned from the history of technology is it's better to be the user than the usee. You want to be the person who understands how it works and is deploying it as a tool. You don't want to be the person who's sort of at the other end and having it used on you. And what has happened with previous realms of technology is that in poorer schools and less advantaged ways, technology replaces teachers, it dumbs down the curriculum, is used to deprofessionalize teaching, and in more advantaged places, kids are learning how to use those tools appropriately, ethically, under the right context and conditions. And so I don't see any reason why this would likely be difficult. All right, I'll pause there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Xiao. And next up, so Emma, your work invites us to step back and examine the broader systems and assumptions that shaped lifelong learning. And drawing on your perspectives across design, learning systems, and your personal experiences, we'd love to hear how you make sense of these shifts and what kind of thinking you see as most important for navigating them.
Yeah, thank you, Yifei. And thank you for everyone being here today. And it's a true honor to be invited to the 17th China Education Symposium. I think 17 is a very interesting age, because this morning I was talking to a girl, a 17-year-old girl. She has just been admitted to Harvard. So she told me about the joy, the struggles that she experienced. She said about 2 months ago, I wanted to do a psychological assessment, but my Asian parents didn't understand. So we talked about this for about half an hour, I think. And just looking at her, I thought about myself at that age. I also imagined my daughter, one day standing where she is now. So, speaking about my recent work at MIT Media Lab, so it's about design future human connection across time, not just space, but across time. Why? Because I think loss. Everybody experiences loss, and people die twice. The first time, we die. The second time, as we are forgotten. So what do we want to be remembered? How do we want to be remembered, and how long do we want to be remembered for? So why is this important? I think it's because we all want to be remembered, right? And so I started asking, if I can travel back in time, back to what would I say to my 17-year-old self? So at 17, I left everything familiar and I went to study in England alone. I just felt like, I was, brave because, but why did I, nobody asked me to do that. Even my parents were not supportive. So I just had that curious, what would the other side of the world look like? So I couldn't imagine, so did the students on the other side of the world also study as we did in school, So I was also worried because I was afraid when everyone else was marching towards the same direction, would I be left behind, Would I lose this sense of feeling safe or secured? So about 10 years later, I was 27. I returned to China with my husband. He became a professor in Shanghai. So we were living with our very young kids at that time. I was lost. I didn't know what to do. Obviously, I wanted to spend time with my children. But as a educated young woman, I also wanted to work. So I think that was my struggle. Okay, great. So I think my path was not linear, and so what I wanted to really share is, in a world that is changing so rapidly, what should we learn? As our keynote speakers have talked about, I think my suggestion is to find something that will stay with you, a question, a problem, that you would really want to spend a lot of time, maybe research for years. Because this morning, I also talked to another person, a co-founder. He had he's running his AI company, and he told me, if you don't want to be a professor, you probably don't need to go to college nowadays. Yeah, I can't agree more with him on that point. However, I think when I want to tell my daughter when she turns 17, I would say, don't compare with other people. You don't have to run faster than people around you. You just need to find that question that is truly yours, and that question will guide you through. Yeah, so I think that would be, what I would tell my daughter when she turns 17. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. And last but not least, Nico, let's turn to you. So your work explores how language learning is being transformed by immersive and AI-mediated environments, where communication is increasingly multimodal and uncertain. So we'd love to hear your perspective on how these shifts reshaping what it means to learn and communicate.
Thank you. So I prepared some. I need my glasses. Hold on a second. So I prepared some thoughts about the future of language learning in a very uncertain and immersive world. So the future of language learning is being shaped by a profound shift. The movement from stable and solely face-to-face communication toward fluid, immersive, and hybrid environments. But the most important shift isn't technological, it's communicative. Communication is becoming multimodal and unpredictable. In immersive environments, communication is no longer just verbal. It's visual, it's spatial, it's gesture-based, it's AI-mediated. Learners may speak, gesture, manipulate objects, and interact with both humans and AI, all within the same exchange. This creates a new condition, as many of us talked about today, uncertainty. And interestingly, research suggests that actually uncertainty can enhance engagement. The motivation of maybe, a concept associated with Robert Sapolsky, helps explain why unpredictable outcomes may drive curiosity, persistence, and sometimes enjoyment. In these environments, learners are constantly interpreting meaning as it unfolds, adjusting, experimenting, and taking risks. But uncertainty is a double-edged sword. While uncertainty can foster creativity and exploration, it also introduces real challenges. So in the future, language learners will be required to interpret multimodal signals, navigate rapid conversational shifts, determine whether they're interacting with a human, an AI, or maybe something in between. And at the same time, identity may become fluid. An avatar may reflect a learner's real self, and its totally aspirational identity, an entirely fictional persona. So that raises a fundamental question. What does authentic communication mean when identity is endlessly reconfigurable? Critics argue that these types of immersive environments may dilute the richness of face-to-face interaction or encourage fragmented, performative identities. But regardless of where we stand, one thing is very clear. The future of language learning is going to require new competencies. Beyond grammar and vocabulary, learners will need multimodal literacy, strategic communication skills, the ability to manage breakdowns in real time, awareness of these shifting identities and shifting contexts. They don't need to know just how to use language, but how to navigate complex communicative ecosystems. And that has major implications for pedagogy. So it no longer focuses on this instruction of grammar and vocabulary and replicating what used to be only was conceived as real-world conversations. Instead, it has to prepare learners to operate across blended realities, what some scholars describe as living between two cultures of presence, the physical and the digital. So this means designing tasks that embrace uncertainty rather than eliminate it, teaching learners how to recover from that misunderstanding, supporting a lot of risk-taking, a lot of experimentation, integrating AI and immersive tools thoughtfully, not as replacements, but as extensions of human interactions. So in short, we have to move from teaching language as a system to teaching communication as adaptive practice. So what's coming next? Like, what might this actually look like in practice? Well, I think we're already seeing these early signs of the future, and I wanted to show you some of the things that I've been paying attention to, not necessarily in language teaching, but what I think it could be. So imagine learning a language not just in the classroom, but in the world itself. Cultural and historical knowledge can now be embedded directly into physical or hybrid spaces. At places like the Anderson County Museum, learners can interact with holographic interlocutors, asking questions, hearing stories, engaging in dialogue across time. Language learning becomes not just communicative, but experiential and human. Or imagine students not just consuming stories, but stepping inside of them. In my French course, learners participated in a surrealist murder mystery in the Centre Pompidou Museum in Paris, writing alibis in French for their characters that served as avatar prompting and then later interacting and interrogating their own avatars. They weren't practicing language, they were experiencing it through interactive narrative. We're also seeing the normalization of global real-time collaboration. In a recent exchange between Harvard graduate students in the School of Education and Stockholm University, this is from my class, learners met in a shared immersive studio space engaging across cultures, time zones, and perspectives. So global interaction is no longer this add-on, it becomes the default of human communication. At the same time, we're having new tools that are reshaping access. Technologies like Captify Smart Classes, I'm not sure if you've seen these before, but they offer real-time captions in multiple languages, opening up participation for learners with different needs and abilities, and it's built into the design. So there's this blending of the real and the virtual. This is also, I'm not sure if you've seen her when she was here, this is during COVID, but this is Laurie Anderson, who's an avant-garde artist, who seems to be standing in Widener Library and interacting with you, even though she's very, very far away. So these boundaries between speaker and space are dissolving. Or perhaps the classroom looks really different. Maybe it's this empty room, 3 walls and immersive floor-to-ceiling portals into other spaces. The one wall is sort of immersive, showcasing a particular context of your choice. The 4th connects you to someone across the world live, and the environment shifts depending on what and how you're learning. And in that environment, language is no longer practiced, it's inhabited. So the future of language learning is not just about all these new tools. It's about new ways of being, interacting, and making meaning.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for sharing such thoughtful reflections. As someone who studied abroad from a very young age and loves to learn new languages and experience different school systems, I definitely resonated a lot with your sharings. So now let's move on to a more interactive conversation. And I'll begin with a broader question that connects closely to our theme this year. So when we speak of 1,000 leaps of change, it can feel both exciting but also overwhelming. So from your perspective, what is one change today that feels truly fundamental to you, such that it's something that is reshaping not just education, but how we understand learning itself? So maybe we can start with Dr. John.
So one of the, let me speak with my microphone. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently, I was just recently at the MIT conference, Imagination in Action, which was last week. We've been talking a lot about generative AI, which is the use, which helps us create language, or creates language for us. But what was very interesting at this conference is that they had an entire room, the entire day was focused on AI agents, which is, I think, something we haven't been talking about as much, but I think they're going to have a very big impact on how people are functioning in the world. AI agents complete tasks for us. And these professionals in the field were talking about how this is going to be an incredible part of everyone's lives, and 40 to 50% of our experiences are going to be interacting with these AI agents. Whether or not that's true or not, they will become part of our ecosystem and our interactions. So how does that impact for me? How does that impact language learning? How am I going to reimagine what real world communication is? We're going to be interacting with AI agents. Students are going to be interacting with AI agents. How do we shift some of our tasks and activities to imagine what that looks like? So that's something I've been thinking about over the last week or so.
Thank you so much for sharing.
So I can connect to that a little bit and build on it. I think the biggest trend of the last maybe 10 years, maybe from Trump Brexit forward, is the fact that history is not in fact over, and that we live in a world of kind of raging passions and tribalisms amidst folks seeking out a more cosmopolitan, pluralistic, democratic identity. And so I think, Dewey, more than 100 years ago now, wrote Democracy in Education, which said that education is both something that is of a democracy and is a place where people have an opportunity to practice the habits of democracy. And so I think that, one big question that I've been asking is how do we revisit that today in a world marked by really substantial socioeconomic inequality, racial and gender inequalities, and this emergence of this kind of dialectic between cosmopolitanism and populist backlash. And if we can't sort of figure out how to develop an education that meets that sort of, to put it really concretely, we have a lot of problems that we're going to need to work together across lines of difference to solve, across national lines, within countries, etc. And so we can't, if education as our sort of common institution can't figure out how to help us do that, then as a human species, we are in big trouble. How education in the world we're living can sort of sew those things together. And I think Fernando's presentation sort of was one entry in this discussion, is one thing that's on my mind these days.
Yeah, I would also like to add on top of that is that I think we are actually standing on the biggest turning point in the history. Since the Industrial Revolution, everything's happening at such a fast speed, and also as a Chinese, that and also many of the people who are here in this room have lived through the highest economic growth in human history, right? So 200 years ago, the Britain was probably the British Empire was after the revolution became really economically wealth, but then about 100 years ago, the United States surpassed it, right? So it has not happened, well, it has happened before, and I can see similarity in that. It's because of the external environment that we consider, we just naturally think everything's gonna be faster, bigger, more, and better, but that's not the case anymore. So I think what's important is actually the inner peace, for us as human, what does it mean to live well, rather than achieve more and becoming more and more successful. I think that applies to learning as well. It's the agency. If there's like one word I want to say, I think it's agency. It's not only the motivation to learn, why we learn, and think about what matters to us. Is actually to go beyond that, as Professor Parkinson talked about. So I think we have to go out and really experience, and by experiencing and reflecting, that's how we can learn deeper, not just on the very superficial level. I mean, getting more and broader, that's fine, that's good, but that is not the most important thing anymore. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. So in the world of changing, we definitely feel the tension between humanity and also new things like technology and everything. So for the next question, I would like to focus on technology. So technology has been one of the most powerful, but maybe the most complex force that's shaping education today. So how do you see it influencing not only how we learn, but what it feels to learn?
I work with technologies to some extent. Obviously, a lot of people at MIT, they're really like tech-minded and tech person. On Tuesday, actually, we had a class on teleabsence, which is a vision that was inspired by Hiroshi Ishii. So I actually invited a guest lecturer from their Chinese archaeology and art history background. So her topic of her talk was about toward life through death. She shared the insights from the ancient Chinese funeral practices, and that actually gave the students a lot of different perspective at how to design HCI, because we are HCI researchers, so we always think about human-computer interactions and how we can use technologies, to design better mediums or, like better experiences. So I think, actually, I also think going back to the history, the rhythm, the rhyme, right? There we see similar patterns, but also we have to look into the future. So I think technology is changing so fast that I don't think anyone is able to catch up with everything nowadays. But the most important thing is actually to think about what matters to you, is that big question that will stay with you. I think that we have to do a lot of introspection, and also there are so many ways to learn. I think where we are now today is actually we stand on the shoulder of the generations before us. I actually think the young people are very fortunate now because they have the freedom to choose how they learn and what to learn, because they, because we're not fighting for the survival anymore, right? Even in China and in other developing countries, maybe not some of them, because we also talk about peace, But I still think this is it's a better time for everyone. So I would like to stay very optimistic about this.
So I teach a course on technology-enhanced language learning here at the Graduate School of Education, and I feel very strongly that technology should be enhancing language education, and when it doesn't, it should not be used. I mean, I think there's a time and a place, and there's sometimes very amazing use cases of technology that can be very compelling, and other moments when it's just not useful. But when I think language pedagogy, when we're teaching language through the principles of 21st century language pedagogy, then we're spiraling the instruction of language and cultural content, right? So we're not just teaching the words, and we're not just teaching the structures, and we're not just teaching vocabulary. What we're doing is we're teaching students how to communicate with others so that they can learn about other people's backgrounds, perspectives, their understanding
their place in the world, the context in which they live. And I think that technology can have the possibility to be very powerful in bringing people together. But it's really through communication that's leveraged.
So, to bring out an idea from my colleague David Perkins sitting here in the first row, is this wonderful idea in his book, Making Learning Whole, about the whole game at the junior level. And his point is that if you are learning something like baseball, you don't spend a year throwing and a year catching and a year batting, and then like say when you get to graduate school, like you're gonna play baseball. And when we read Dave's, so you've got like 6 or 7-year-olds on the field trying to do all of those things, and as someone who has a 6-year-old, I can assure you it is not pretty. But they, it's not that you don't need to practice the parts, but you practice the parts with some understanding of the whole, even if it's a sort of junior understanding. And so listening to Professor Mills talk about her vision of language learning, I think language learning is something that historically has been very much like, have to learn all these parts and then maybe someday there will be a whole. And so immersive technologies sort of create an opportunity to create wholes when, maybe the best thing to do would just be to like plunge them down in France for a year and tell them to figure it out, but like that's not practical. So given what we've got, this may be, and that leads to sort of a hinge point, which I think is important. One is, I feel like it's always important to ask, like, is the technology, is the best version of this learning sort of with the technology or like without the technology? So like 8 people sitting around the table discussing a text, like if you're trying to unleash a text, like is 8 people sitting around Zoom discussing a text, is that better? Probably not. But if you take something like Michael Sandel's class in the yard, if he's going to discuss big questions of justice, like is it better to do it just with, a plurality of North American students, which is what he would find here? Or is it better to do it, as he's done it sometimes, with the course running simultaneously in 3 countries around the world and have students with different perspectives talking with each other? There, like the technology is making possible something that you couldn't do in the room. So I think one question to ask is like, is this sort of technology-mediated version like better than the non-technology version at its best, or vice versa?
Well, thank you so much. There are definitely challenges, but I hope education can help us stay optimistic. And last but not least, I would like to return to the idea of illumination in our theme. And I would like to invite all of you to share one thing that you hope education will help us see more clearly in the future as the closing for this session.
Okay, I'll go first. I think reminds me about last night, about 10 o'clock. I was trying to write something, prepare, for today's little speech, and my daughter, she came out from her room, and then she asked me, so what are you doing? So I showed her, the things I wrote, about like 2 pages, and then she read through it, and she thought, Mom, I don't think people are gonna like to listen about this. I don't think people are gonna like it. Did you use AI to write it? I said, no, I wrote it. I just, asked AI to help me to make better English, She said, but I just feel like it's very AI, Maybe you should begin with a story, Why don't you tell them about, your personal experience, your story? I think that's more interesting. So, I just go back to that question. I always look at the younger generation. I see, illumination on them. I always feel like they're better, much better than us. So I always have this, really warm kind of feeling that we are actually going towards a brighter future. As I'm looking at looks like a 17-year-old, in the audience, I'm really full of hope. Yeah, even AI, I think it has changed a lot of things. I think AI is like a printing. It's like a print, technology. A lot of new technologies have happened before, and there are going to be more coming, of course. But why should we be afraid of them? We're not going to be replaced by any technologies. I don't think so. Yeah, so I really feel like the hope is the young people, our younger generation, and I think they will lead us to a much better future.
So when I heard that question, what would you like to see in the future? It reminds me of this construct in the psychology of language learning, which is the construct of vision. And the construct of vision is if students or learners or language learners are able to envision themselves using the language, experiencing the culture in their personal, professional, or academic futures, they're more apt to be motivated to actually go through the tremendous pursuit and time and effort that it takes to learn language, which is, as we all know, is a long process. So when I think about that, I think about how vision gives us a mission, right? And I think it goes back to some of the earlier talks that we heard today about how we need to have a purpose. Vision gives us a mission, and vision gives us a purpose. And I think learning today, I'd like to see more purpose in the teaching and learning.
So I'd like to answer with a brief story. I was in a school and I was studying a theater production, and there was a woman there who was the costume designer. And I said, pardon me, but this isn't my area. What do costume designers do? And she said, well, the clothes have to match the mood of the scene. You cannot have a crying person on stage or in a TV show or in a movie wearing a bright pink neon shirt. It just won't work. There has to be a fit between the clothes that people are wearing and the ethos and the mood of the scene. And she said, if you don't believe me, just go home and turn on the television. And I did. I went home. I turned on France. I'd seen it 1,000 times. And I looked at the characters, and I looked at what they were wearing, and I listened to what they were saying, and sure enough, there was a match between the kinds of things they were wearing and the rhythm of the scene. So I think that's what great teachers do. They give you a lens, a way of seeing something that will enable you to notice and make sense of things that you may have seen 1,000 times, but you didn't really understand because you didn't have a lens through which to see it. So I don't think that there's kind of one answer to your question, but I would hope that students could have as many of those kinds of experiences as possible across the huge sort of plethora of things that we do and try to understand as human beings.
And the lens and the glasses help you to see clearer, right? With better clarity.
Yeah, thank you so much for those beautiful notes to end on. And with that, we conclude the panel session of our opening ceremony. And once again, thank you so much, Zhao, Nicole, and Emma for your sharing. And this has been a truly enriching conversation. I hope everyone has been enjoying it as I did. So yeah, please join me in thanking our panelists once again. And we will move on to the next speech. Thank you so much.
As we we come to the close of our opening ceremony, we would like to extend our sincere appreciation to the partners who share our vision for the future of education and whose support has made today's gatherings possible. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our sponsored speaker, Mr. Wei-Han Wang, founder and president of the Visionary Education Foundation. The Visionary Education Foundation is an innovation-driven non-profit dedicated to empowering students through scholarship and long-term mentorship. Through its work, it seeks to expand access, broaden perspectives, and support young people in pursuing meaningful pathways forward. Mr. Wang is also an engineer leader at Google, specializing in cloud infrastructure and AI technologies. As the founder of AI Computing Inc., he was the first Chinese entrepreneur backed by Y Combinator by YC. He serves on the board of SOAR Foundation and supports cross-disciplinary research at Westlake University. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Wang Wei-Han.
This picture was taken like 12 years back, so it's a bit different. So thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here today. And it's also a great learning opportunity for me, so I just learned so much. The theme of this year's symposium is, again, 1,000 leaps of change. And when we look back at the landscape of Chinese education for the past decade, we truly do see 1,000 leaps. We have witnessed historic investments in infrastructure. We have seen the widespread deployments of digital learning tools, as this saw. And we have celebrated a massive expansion of university enrollment. So for the vast majority of students in China today, physical access to college classrooms and basic financial support are no longer the primary barriers to an education. Through national initiatives and widespread philanthropy, we have largely bridged that first mile gap. But as that first mile is conquered, we are forced to confront a second order challenge. It is a challenge that is harder to see, but equally devastating. Because as the college gates will open wider than ever before, a new invisible chasm just has opened beyond that. This is a chasm of social capital. We face a deeply uncomfortable polarization paradox. We like to think of the university as a great equalizer, but in reality, social polarization often continues as the student steps onto campus. Two students may sit in the exact same lecture hall, listening to the exact same professor and taking the exact same exams. Yet, they inhabit two entirely different worlds of opportunity. One student navigates their college years with a map and a compass, or GPS. A network of inherited professional connections, family guidance, and an intuitive understanding of how the modern economy works. The other student, often from a rural or lower income background, is often walking in the dark. They have the degree, but they lack the social navigation tools required to actually use it. So our core mission at the Visionary Education Foundation is to address this very gap. We believe in the simple and yielding principle. 有志青年不因局促而苟且. Or ambitious youth should never have to compromise their potential simply because of the situational constraints they were born into. To bridge this chasm, we cannot simply offer more lectures. We must offer human companionship. Specifically, we must provide two things that traditional academia struggles to teach: armor and flame. Let me explain what I mean by armor, or 铠甲. Armor is market resilience. It is the professional scaffolding, the unspoken market rules, and the tactical competence needed to navigate a highly volatile, highly competitive modern workforce. University faculty are brilliant, but they are often removed from the brutal day-to-day realities of corporate front lines. Students without a safety net need an experienced mentor to hand them the shield of resilience. They need someone to teach them how to navigate office dynamics, how to read a room, and how to translate academic theory into professional execution. Armor allows a student to enter a competitive environment with the exact same social navigation tools as their most privileged peers. However, Armor alone only creates a survivor. And we do not just want these students to survive. We want them to thrive and then lead. So that brings us to the second pillar, the flame, or 火苗. The flame is a spark of purpose and impact. Internally, it is about protecting a student's visionary capacity from being distinguished by the early career cynicism of the modern workplace. What the sociologists call the iron cage of productivity. It is so easy for young, ambitious students to enter the corporate machine only to trade their ideals for a paycheck. It is a flame that protects their internal idealism. But it also represents an outward influence. The flame is a commitment beyond itself. It is a drive to bring positive social influence to one's community. It is a pursuit of shared progress. We want to cultivate students who do not just climb the ladder to escape their background, but who rise in order to lift their communities up with them. Forging this armor and protecting this flame cannot be done in a weekend seminar. It requires longitudinal companionship. It is a multi-year commitment from a dedicated mentor to work alongside a student, ensuring they become both invincible in the market and indispensable to the society. So over the last 6 years, we have built the hard infrastructure to make it a reality. What we do is not just casual volunteering, it's a highly sophisticated, professionalized social mentorship system. We utilize rigorous mentor vetting. We conduct structured and specialized training. We ensure that every interaction between the mentor and the mentee is not just a friendly chat, but a high-impact professional intervention. And because of this rigor, we have witnessed profound transformations in our students. We see in their professional readiness as a shift from academic passivity to market fluency with industry-standard precision. But more importantly, we see it in their psychological resilience. For students from disadvantaged background, the greatest barrier to success is rarely a lack of intelligence. It is a deep-seated inner doubt. It is the crushing weight of imposter syndrome. So I think of a student we work with from a remote rural area. When she first entered college, she was intimidated by the basic social interactions and so fearful of self-expression that she remained invisible in the classroom. And she missed out on important leadership and growth opportunities simply because she did not believe she belonged in this room. Through targeted long-term mentorship, she completely rewired that hesitation. She gained profound self-assurance to step up, lead high-stake projects, and pursue the ambitious dreams they had previously hidden away. So that is what Armor does. And then we see the cultivation of higher professional calling. A student might come to us simply to seek basic employment as a means of survival. As they receive the armor and the flame, and in their entire perspective shifts. They stop asking, how can I get a job? They start asking, how my career solve a broader societal challenge. They move from pure self-reservation to deep societal contributions. So they go from looking for a paycheck to changing the community. These transformations are nothing short of miraculous. But there is a hard truth we must face today. Miracles do not scale. Traditional philanthropic models relying on discrete financial donations and the pure goodwill of volunteers cannot scale to meet the needs of millions of students. Goodwill is a beautiful thing, but it fluctuates, it experiences fatigue. To solve this social capital deficit at a national level, we must move beyond the logic of charity. We must view social mentorship as a self-sustaining market economy, a dynamic ecosystem that does not seek monetary profit, but instead leverages market incentives for a noble, transformative cause. Just imagine the university not just as the ivory tower, but a dynamic marketplace. In this marketplace, the crucial resource being exchanged is not money, but social capital. So, on one side of this marketplace, you have staggering demand. Millions of students desperate for professional on-ramps and mentorship. On the other side, you have the supply, the immense body of industry professionals. But why would their employers unleash the supply into this marketplace without relying purely on philanthropy? Because their return on investment is undeniable. First, it provides direct talent access. Recruiting is expensive and risky. Mentorship is the ultimate high-trust vetting process. It gives employers early, exclusive access to a proven pool of armor-clad talent before they even hit the open job market. Second, it offers unparalleled branding and marketing. Employers gain authentic exposure directly to the student body through their own employees. It creates a powerful branding halo to the next generation of workers and consumers that traditional advertising simply cannot reach. Third, and perhaps most profoundly, employees also benefit from powerful incentives. Employees, the professionals, their relationship with students promotes lifelong learning and mutual growth, where the act of coaching often triggers deep self-reflection. Mentors find a profound sense of self-actualization and immense satisfaction in empowering others, often building enduring high-trust bonds. These powerful experiences, in turn, drives higher employee satisfaction and engagement for the company. And the alignment doesn't stop with just the employers and their professionals. For universities, this marketplace directly improves their most critical key performance indicators. It bridges the starting gap between academic degrees and the actual career, ensuring higher quality placements for their own graduates. And last but not least, for the government, this model addresses one of the most urgent societal challenges of our time, youth employment. And it does so through a scalable private sector-led ecosystem that does not drain public funds. When you align the incentives of the student, the employer, the professional, the university, and the state, the system propels itself. And we know this works. We are already piloting this market economy model with partner organizations today. We are proving that when incentives are properly aligned, mentorship ceases to be a charitable burden, but becomes a powerful economic engine. But we cannot build this market alone. So I stand before you today to extend an invitation to the educators, the policymakers, and industry leaders who are with us today. Join us in this collaboration. It is time for us to stop treating mentorship as a nice-to-have charitable side project. We must treat mentorship as an essential human capital infrastructure for a polarized age. Let us to commit to building a future where the college gate is not merely an entrance, but a true launchpad. A future where every ambitious student is fully equipped with the armor to survive the market, and entrusted with the flame to lift up the society. Thank you.
Wow, With that, as we bring the opening ceremony to a close, we want to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude.
Thank you to all our distinguished speakers, panelists, and honored guests for sharing your wisdom and time with us today.
And thank you to every attendee, including our colleagues from Beijing Normal University and East China Normal University, for being part of this global conversation. We would also like to express our sincere gratitude once again to our exclusive nonprofit partner, the Visionary Education Foundation, for their continued support.
And a special thank you to our incredible team of over 150 volunteers, assistants, forum organizers, and staff, including our core executive team who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. None of this would be possible without you. We would also like to extend our sincere appreciation to Hanxi Student Affairs Office, especially Crystal, Kevin, Andrea, and John, for your continued support throughout the journey.
And this opening ceremony is only the beginning. Over the upcoming weekend, we will host 6 online sub-forums and special featured events. Our 6 online sub-forums this year feature a diverse range of topics. We believe that change first emerges in the lived realities of education, and as new technologies enter the classrooms, we are prompt to ask, in an environment filled with algorithms, what is still required from educators? To answer this very question we came up, we have developed a teacher empowerment subforum titled Initiating Change.
As generative AI makes answers readily available, we must answer, if known is no longer scarce, what does wisdom mean? To address this question, we have developed an educational technology subforum titled Transforming Change.
And as information is produced and disseminated at a fast speed, we realize that rapid access doesn't necessarily mean understanding, and passive consumption doesn't necessarily mean judgment. To engage with this question, we have developed a media literacy subforum titled Navigating Change.
As technology expands the boundaries of education, new inequities quietly emerge. Who is seen and who is overlooked? To approach this question, we have developed an education equity subforum titled Examining Change.
The next up, as pressure and pace enter the family domain and expectations intertwine with anxiety, we ask, do we still truly see one another? To respond to this question, we have developed a family education subforum named Reframing Change.
And while all these changes ultimately return to the mind and heart of the individual, when uncertainty becomes a constant condition, we begin to hope. Can education cultivate inner strengths? To speak to this question, we have developed a well-being forum titled Sustaining Change.
So these changes are not isolated. They are deeply interconnected across dimensions, from teachers to technology, from information to equity, and from family to the inner self. We seek to understand, amid change, how can education remain centered on human? And amid change, how can education help us become whole?
Tomorrow, we'll also be hosting 2 in-person events. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. in Asquith Hall, we will hold the Postgraduate Scholars Conference, bringing together distinguished speakers and emerging scholars representing diverse international contexts to engage in vibrant discussions on cutting-edge research in education. Across 3 key themes, inclusive education, whole person education, and AI in education. From 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., we will also host the Edu Future Expo at Gottman Conference Center, featuring over 20 organizations showcasing their educational innovations and recruiting talents. We warmly invite you to join us and look forward to seeing you there.
万物皆流，不舍昼夜。在时代的千重跃迁之中，教育也许从来不是最耀眼的存在，但它却始终是最持久的力量。它存在于那些微小却真实的瞬间，一次被理解的表达，一段被引导的思考，一腔被相信的热忱，一种被点亮的可能。点点微光汇聚成星火，微微星火终将照亮长夜。
以变为名，我们彼此相遇；向光而行，我们继续前进。在时代的节点上，哈佛中国教育论坛愿与每一位同行者一起，探索教育如何在变化之中汇聚智慧，又如何在不确定中照亮未来。
As we look towards the future, may we embrace change, pursue the light, and together write a new chapter of the future of the education.
再次感谢各位出席第17届哈佛中国教育论坛开幕式。愿我们遇变烛光，向志而行。谢谢大家。
Now we want to invite everyone to join us for a group photo. Can everyone just gather to the center, please? Please remain seated as our photographer comes to the stage. If you prefer not to be in the photo, you may exit at this time. Thank you.